This is the Jewish Executive Project, a podcast that interviews inspiring and accomplished leaders in the world of business and entrepreneurship. Join veteran international businessman Mike Aaron and performance and leadership coach Rabbi Jacob Rupp, the executive director of Aish, Minnesota, as they discuss what it means to lead through the lens of Jewish values.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. I'm thrilled to be here with my co-host, Mike Aaron. We are speaking today with Peter Merrick, who is an income and capital enhancement consultant, speaker, and author. He's been in the business since the early 1990s, helping businesses with succession consulting and post-secondary financial education. He is the author of three textbooks, and also the author of a recently released novel, The King of Main Street. He has interviewed some of the biggest minds in the world, is a respected influencer and authority in LinkedIn, and has been involved in mentoring and helping both seasoned business leaders and aspiring entrepreneurs alike. And boy, this conversation was phenomenal. We spoke about living in the present, how to get the best out of yourself, the best out of your life, what you really should be focusing on as a business owner, as an executive, and all around just like living through these wonderfully turbulent times. So with no further ado, I give you Mike Aaron and Peter Merrick. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. Rabbi Rupp. This is the first time I take it as a compliment. It's the first time you've let me lead off the introductions.
You know what? I've been waiting for this moment. You're flying the nest. Thanks to Peter's commentary. You are fast becoming the sought after mentor and celebrity in the entrepreneurial world. I knew you had in you. So I'm thrilled, and the floor is yours.
Well, you're the one that told me to do it. So anyway, I'm so glad we get to meet Peter Merrick. So Peter is, I met Peter probably, I would think about 15 years ago, Peter in Toronto, something like that, right?
I think it was actually in we had to go to San Diego to meet each other, even though our backgrounds are tied together.
Correct. I picked you up at your wife's parents. So anyway,
Yes.
That's got to be 10 years ago. And San Diego has been blessed to have Peter and his family move out here. And I'm so excited for Peter to talk to us because it's rare in today's world to meet someone who is so passionately curious about others, so passionately curious about their life model, their life principles, their life values, and most importantly, their journey along the way. So I'm really excited to hear about Peter's own life journey, values, and morals, and sharing with us the best lessons and best practices he's learned from the phenomenal people he gets to spend time with. So welcome, Peter.
Thank you so much, Michael. Thank you so much, Jacob, for having me on today.
So maybe, Peter, you can start off because Rabbi Rupp hasn't met you properly before. Just give us a snapshot of Peter Merrick, from little Peter Merrick to 6'3" Merrick and intellectual 8 foot.
Well, it's always a journey. Learning has always been a passion of mine. However, it's usually through the hiccups in our life we actually have the greatest learning in our lives, because it forces us to step back. And for me, the reason I'm in San Diego is about 18 months ago, I had a bit of a health scare that made me realize that the only thing that we're promised is today. And the day that I actually had the health scare, I was thinking about everything else tomorrow, the next day, the next year. And even when I was in the hospital, I was talking about what I was going to do when I left the hospital, and thinking that I could just resume what I wanted to do. And it was during that time I decided to make a large decision to go along with the decision. My wife wanted to come back to San Diego. And for me, it was just something that might happen, could happen, but there was really no motivating factor for it to happen. And it was at that point I said, let's do it. And that was about 1.5 years ago. And it has been a really great decision, because I don't think unless I had one of those breaks in my life, I would have done it. And just thing I want to share with you guys is I realized that for each and every person, the biggest person who gets in our way happens to be ourselves. We were just to get out of our way of our own life would just happen. And for me, moving here has been a really great growth, not just personally, but also in business too. It's funny, I call it the 100-mile rule. I go back to Canada, nobody breaks a meeting with someone who's flown 3,000 miles for that meeting. And it's that's been really interesting to actually experience. So Mike, that's just a little background on myself, or how I am where I am.
But you know, the point you make is you're sitting in this hospital, you have that epiphany moment that really what we have is the day that we're in front of right now. But I know a little bit about your history. You've had a few of those moments in your life. And why was this the one time that you actually said the moment of let's make a big decision didn't last only for 24 hours? You actually acted on it boldly. Why was this one different to all the others?
Well, I have to add, I'm very fortunate. My wife and her personality and mine are much different. My wife likes to be constantly in movement. So I'm the anchor. I want the change, but she's the one who embraces the change. And she's lived in 4 different countries, and so I was at that moment, I said, you're right. And I was also 50 years old, and I looked at myself and I said, well, my father died at 59. What am I waiting for? Like, what am I waiting for? And I think the biggest thing that's happened to me, Mike and Jacob, is I'm more in the moment, meaning this is where I am instead of like, this is where I was and this is where I'd like to be. I'm actually just enjoying myself now. And Jacob, you want to hear something funny? My wife goes and tells me last night, she sees these 2 men who are behaving like boys, who are blocking her from driving on the street, and she realizes these 2 men on electric scooters are Michael and I. And she's saying, is there something about men and toys and things like that? And I'm thinking, when I'm riding my scooter, and Mike has a passion for it as well, I'm just in the moment. I just enjoy it.
Yeah.
And I think for most of my life, and most of the people I've been around my entire life, they've always focused on building more, building their egos up, building their businesses up.
Can I stop you and ask you about that? Because I was actually having a conversation with a client of mine yesterday about this exact piece, which is that for an entrepreneur, the idea of being in build mode is such a consistent frame of mind. And no matter how big we build or what we create, oftentimes it's like we feel like we have to keep in motion in order for us to be successful. So the idea, what you're suggesting, for a lot of people, it sounds great and aspirational in the sense that, yeah, I'd like to sit back and relax and to be in the moment. And it is very inspiring to think that some people would say, well, if I haven't figured out how to do it by 50, I'm not going to figure out how to do it. But tell, perhaps in your experience personally, or with the people that you know, is it always this driving forward motion that makes the most success? Or is there some kind of way that if you adopt, I just want to be present, that you could still have some reasonable expectation that there would be some kind of a financial growth in your life? Or is it just, if I'm present, I'm sitting on the beach in San Diego, and if I'm working, I'm in the office?
I truly believe that an individual, and you guys please add to this, I think life wakes us up. And it doesn't mean when you are present, you aren't driven and success is not coming to you. It's just your motivation for it is so much different. And I had the pleasure of listening to Michael giving a really great podcast with a friend of mine, Greg Witch, yesterday. And the mentorship is an important part of that. And I think the big realization, Jacob, is somebody comes to the realization that the world was here before me and the world will be here after me. And at that point, what's really important? Because I think about it, I don't know who my great grandparents were. I really don't, but I am here because of them. And if they were thinking about building whatever they were going to build, whatever it was destroyed in Europe. However, the quality of life that we have, and I think life catches up to us, and I think our bodies make us wake up. Because we can't do what we wanted to do when we were young, because I can't do an all-nighter. I can't go out and have 15 drinks and wake up the next morning and not have a hangover and be in pain for, let's say, 3 weeks. Like, our bodies tell us that maybe we should slow down. And then at that point, that for those who, just going to move away from the sun, for those of us who come to that understanding, we look at ways of streamlining, like what's important. Who should we spend time with? Who should we get? What experiences? What people can we get the most leverage? And what I mean by leverage is the best experience. Because as I get older, the number one drive that I realize is we want comfort and happiness. And then the question comes, well, how do I place myself in that situation where I can have that? And all the sages have said, the great in our tradition says that it's giving. It's giving ourselves to other people. And I've got a really great story I want to share with you, because I think I have a habit now. Well, something I do is I write reviews on people. So I had an article written in one of the largest financial publications in Canada on me. And people who I hadn't seen for 25 years, they started calling me up, congratulating me. And the guy who wrote it, he took out all the bad parts of my life. The guy he was writing about sounded great. And it just made me feel good. And I decided that, while I'm here, I'm just going to go on people who have helped me out, either in business or in life, or helped me see things that I hadn't seen before. I'm going to take that moment and I'm going to go and write something on them. And it's going to be a bomb. I'm just going to drop it. And I have 17,000 followers on LinkedIn. And I'm just going to drop it and watch the reaction that happens. And I get such pleasure from it.
You did it to me. I like my low profile. But I want to expand on something, Peter. You touched on something. It was just one sentence, but it's really an important sentence. But just by the way, when Jack Welch, when he was still chairman of GE, spoke to a Harvard graduating class, I asked him, give us one major tip as we progress in our lives. And it was akin to what you said. He said, be in the moment. When you're in that shower, don't be thinking about business or anybody else. Be thinking about the water drops hitting your back. He says it's the biggest challenge we all have in today's world. But you said something earlier which really resonated. You said when you're on your bike or being in the moment, it doesn't mean that you aren't being productive, and it doesn't mean that you aren't still building, and it doesn't mean that you aren't creating. And I want to take that as an introduction to something you and I have spoken about a few times, is about legacy. So in other words, when you're being in the moment and your actions are speaking louder than your words, and you have a calmness, those around you see that, and that inculcates and percolates in them. But you wrote a book which was intended as a reflection of legacy. And subsequent to that, you've now met with some of Nobel Prize winners and some of the most complete people in the world. And you once commented to me on how few of them were focused on legacy or even can talk about a legacy. So let's talk about you and the book you wrote and your legacy, and then the legacies that you got to spend time with.
Well, I spent a lot of time thinking.
First of all, the name of his book is called The King on Main Street. It's a bestseller on Amazon. The King on Main Street.
Thank you so much. And I just want to share why I called it The King of Main Street. I called it The King of Main Street because it's not about Wall Street. It's about regular people contributing to their communities, to society. And those are the people who are the kings, the princes, the queens that make our society work. And they're in a capitalist society, basically, it's the greatest form of democracy because people are choosing to trade and interact with each other. And one of the things that I thought about it, I had an opportunity a really great opportunity. I was able to sit down every week with a very, very successful business owner who was responsible for building about 23,000 condominiums in the city that I'm from, Toronto. And he was running the race of the first half of life. And Carl Jung talks about the first half is called the morning, and it's all about ego, and it's about acquiring, and it's about going out there. And then if someone's really lucky, they wake up to that and they say, okay, that was the first half. That's the first race of life. The second race of life is about deconstructing ego and giving it all away, because that's going to be the greatest gift you get, because telling people stories about what it was like when you were younger, giving them advice, spending that time, people start donating, they start giving themselves, because that's the second half. And however you did in the first half, it's like that race is over. That was swimming. Now you're cycling. It's got to be something completely different. And I had an opportunity to observe this man, and it didn't matter how successful he was. And he did this purchase this property that they're going to be doing a $10 billion development on in the city I come from. And he was still not happy. He was still running the whatever it was, the race of the first half of life. And he passed away, and he was miserable. Didn't matter what he had. He was miserable. And during that time, I was thinking, well, how do I not end up like that? And I got obsessed with reading books on male aging. And I read over 200 books on male aging. And it was, at first, I was thinking I was reading about gentlemen like him, and something hit me. You know the difference between the eater and Eden? Gentlemen?
Yeah.
Time. And I realized these people I was reading about, it was about me. And I said, if I can take everything I've learned in business, and my business is helping people get out of their businesses, get their money out of their companies, it's got to be more than that, because just getting them out to what? Retiring to what? Selling to what? Like, I have people say, I'm going to take up golf. Well, do you play golf now? No. What makes you think you're going to play golf when you retire? And I also had a really great opportunity early on in my career. I was working with an outplacement company for a big union that had all these police officers who were taking retirement after 30 years, like 52, 56. And I asked, why are you retiring? Because they weren't being forced to retire. And their answer was this: well, I knew Joe. And Joe, he was a lifer. That meant he retired at 65. And then he followed his wife around, and she was aggravated. And 6 months ago, after he retired, he died. And then there was Joseph. And Joseph, he retired. He was a lifer, and he fought like he was bored and whatever. And I went to his funeral, and I were thinking, I don't want that to be my story, that I'm going to die with my boots on and I have no purpose. I'm young enough to do something else. And to answer the question about why did I make this drastic change, I had the opportunity, and we all have that opportunity, to learn from other people's lives and watch what happened to these people, to listen about other people's lives and say, do I want that life? Because none of us are different. It doesn't matter what our stories are. We all are subjected to time, and eventually our ticket on this planet in this form ends, and you got a choice. You get a ticket to an amusement park. You can go as many rides as you want during the day, or you could choose just to sit on a bench. But at the end of the day, the amusement park closes. It doesn't matter who you were.
Peter, I wanted to interrupt you. See, yeah. Mike apologized for interrupting you, but I've been the only one that has been doing it. I was just sharing literally about an hour ago with my wife and I were doing a Facebook live video, and I was sharing. Well, now we'll put it who the mentor of mine was. It was Mike. I asked him because Mike knew me at very difficult financial time for myself. And I asked Mike, I said, do you ever get to a point where you don't worry about money? And Mike said, no. He said that, it just gets bigger and bigger. And no, you never graduate. And so what fundamentally shifted in my mind was I was waiting for a time when I wouldn't be anxious. Again, obviously it means have a certain level of stability in your life, obviously. But I realized it wasn't like I was ever going to reach a point where I didn't worry about money. On the flip side, I looked at Mike and I said, but you're happy and you have the things that matter around you. You have the family around you. And so it's like, you've been able to disassociate, or at least from my perspective, the anxiety around the financials and the pleasure and the joy that you have in life. And that was a very profound moment for me that, again, as of whatever, it's probably about 5 years ago, I'm still thinking about a lot. And I'm curious, as you talk about when a person shifts from, what am I going to do when I get out of business? Like, and again, we see that a lot. Like, no one wants to sell, not because there's not a huge financial upside, but it's like, this is my identity. This is who I am. This is what I do. How do you help people practically? The mindset, perhaps, again, I know that it's probably a broad question, but what are some questions or action steps people could be taking in order to start to live outside of their business even before they've left it?
See, one of the things that I've decided for myself is I don't get people to that point. I find those people. Like, I find those people who want to take money off the table, people who are predisposed to like what I do, because I help them take large amounts of whatever they produce off the table to do whatever they want to do. And I find those people. And one of the, getting back to the book, I did put some Yiddish cup in it. I basically did put questions that those people who are looking to find the lexicon, the language for what they're feeling, that they'll make that change, but that change is within them. I can't make someone do anything. Maybe for a short time I can do coercion, but there's going to be buyer's remorse in them doing it. So there's very few, like, again, I'm very fortunate because I've met some interesting people who've accomplished a lot externally that the world would consider important, and they're still searching. And again, that switch just happens. I shared Mike a story yesterday, which for me was one of the most profound, piece of advice, and I don't think the person was even as conscious of the profoundness for me. At 52 years old, he made a big change in his life. And I said to him, Richard, do you wish you did this earlier? And his answer to me is, I wasn't ready to do it earlier. It was at 52. It was at that moment. And I'm thinking, that is so wise, because, it's like, oh, I should have done this and I should have done that. No, you were ready to do it, because when you're ready to do it, you'll do it. And so the question I ask myself in business all the time, how do I find those people who are predisposed at that moment, who are ready to do it? Sort of like, if I want to catch a salmon, I'm not going to go to Lake Ontario. I'm going to go to the mouth of the Simon Fraser River. That's where I'm going to go. And those people are more predisposed to say, what you have to offer, Peter, that's what I want. The other thing, which I think is where peace comes, and Mike, you can validate this, and Jacob as well, is the ability to say, this is who I am, this is what I do, what you do, Jacob, is great, what Mike does is great, and you're going to be successful, because people can be successful doing whatever they find is important. That's not my path, and that doesn't bring me closer to where I want to be. And it's the ability to say no.
So you said something very interesting. You said that I don't try and coerce people or try and convince people what is not authentically themselves. And I think that is the biggest problem with self-help, the whole big self-help industry, is there are very few people that practice in that industry that have the courage and the insight to say to someone, what you're asking me to mentor, coach you to be is not authentically who you are. And I might get you there, but you're going to have buyer's remorse. So what you say, and that's why when I talk to people, say, can you give me some insight? I make them do a SWOT analysis, right, Rabbi? And then I take that strength, weakness, opportunities, threat analysis, and I throw it back at them. I say, you're wrong. I had this young lady who's got great potential. And she put on that she's a strength, or she's intelligent, blah, blah, blah. And I said, nope, you actually aren't intelligent. What you are is a brilliant relationship builder. If you know that you're not intelligent, you can turn it into a strength. Because then when the intelligent aspect of a conversation comes up, you bring somebody else in. So she's like, whoa, that was a bit of a punch in the gut. I said, no, I'm just trying to help you be as authentically great as you possibly can be. She says, well, why doesn't anybody ever talk like that? I said, because that's not the industry. The self-help industry is to take Peter's dreams and say, I can help you get there, even if they aren't really your dreams, as opposed to saying, Peter, are you sure that's your dream? Or is that the next door neighbor's dream that you're trying to replicate that's really not who you are? And
Can I?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm so sorry to interrupt. There's just, you touched on two things that are so core to my heart. One thing is, as of late, and again, we can add the self-help industry, but I think for a lot of times also the messaging that people get in the Jewish world when you sit down in a synagogue is in a lot of ways very, very similar. And again, just from my perspective now, speaking a little bit more, I realize that this is kind of common for people of different faiths, which is the idea that one of the things I always tell the coaches that I'm training is that a needy coach is a bad coach. As soon as you're needy, right? So then no one's going to work with you, and the people that work with you are not going to get any benefit from it. So I think what you're saying is exactly right, is oftentimes you see that the people that are giving the kind of advice, which is not drill into your soul and be true to that, that's a needy person that hasn't done the work on themselves. And there's this agenda, like you have to represent my version of success because I made that up for me, and that I have to validate that for whatever reason. And I think that that's ultimately why, and again, it's fascinating because you think about the lockstep groupthink that's going on today, and you look at someone like Rav Kook writing 100 years ago, and all he was saying is like, pay attention to your soul, pay attention to yourself. Getting religious means going inward, not outward. Becoming self-developed is dealing with your own stuff again and again and again. And this is, for me, this quote that I've been like life-changing, says that most righteous people don't see the holiness of their own desires. They're busy pushing it down and pretending it doesn't exist. And righteous people like me shouldn't want to do things like that. It's like, no, pay attention to it, because that's ultimately where you're going to get the salvation. So I love that. I'm sorry for cutting you off. Please continue.
Yeah. Well, on that basis, Peter, why don't you tell us? Because in the last 2 weeks, he's met with a Nobel Prize winner, right, in economics. And a guy, how many books did the guy sell? The guy this week?
Probably like altogether 15 million.
15
million
different
languages.
And you came away really wrestling with those interactions. Can you tell us why?
Well, one of the things, I want to step back, one of my passions, and anybody who knows me, is writing. To me is like someone writing a musical song. Like the words have to just be animate, and it's like it allows me to, my belief is like our thoughts are the same thing as a table. The difference is it's fast moving energy according to physics. So I want to slow it down and maybe reorganize it and then put it back into my head. And when I meet someone and I write these reviews, and I've done, I guess, over 300 of them now. And I just, I look for the thread. What's the thread about that person? And I met these individuals, and one of them, he had won a Nobel Prize, and he was just happy to sit with me, and he was just content, and we just had a nice time. This man has had trillions of dollars have been made off of this man's theory. He's the equivalent of Albert Einstein in finance, right, Mike? He's like
I launched my business off his theory.
And the other gentleman, thousands, millions of people have read him, and they've created really good businesses, and he's like shine a light. And I just, I'm wrestling with like, what does this mean? Because I'm sitting there, and the first thing I said to them, which I think this is literally how I feel, like I'd say to myself, I really don't want anything from these people. I'm at the point I don't want anything. I just want to learn. I'm right now. And I said to one of them, I said, when I was 30 and 40, I would have loved for you to like rub my head and anoint me as the next one, but I just don't want it, because if I wanted it, I would have tried to do it. That's the realization I think everyone has to come to, whether consciously or unconsciously, whatever you have like at your stage, you wanted it. You have the life you want, or you haven't learned the lesson that you have, because I don't, like when I was younger, I wanted 1,000 people working for me. I wanted my name and brights and whatever. And then I thought about it and I said, well, no, I don't really want it. And I also, another realization I came to, many people, because I deal with those individuals, and I find that, well, Michael, you're South African, and people who stayed in South Africa, they have a beautiful life, right? Like the most beautiful life ever. And they built gilded cages for themselves, right? They can't leave their compounds because it's dangerous out there. And I go and meet these people who built these great gilded cages, being their businesses, and they're stuck. And they turn to me saying, how do I get out? Because I'm on that treadmill and I don't know how to get out. And I guess the thing that I'm looking for is like, what is a good life? Like, that's really what it is. Like, who's going to be surrounding me? What am I going to learn? What's a good life? And if you ask me, what do I want to do right now? I'm at a point in my life I don't really know. I'm really open to where life takes me. I have certain skills, and I'm going to, out of habit, that's the lens I see the world through. So if I meet a business owner, I'm going to say, I know how to take money off the table. However, I'm really open to where life takes me, and I'm talking to the two of you. And if you asked me last year, I would say I couldn't imagine this. However, I do want to share something which for me was beautiful and has happened several times in my life. In 2004, I write about this in my book, my life blew up. I was on the verge of bankruptcy. I felt humiliated. I actually, after living a very nice life, I ended up moving in with my mother, because I was going through a terrible divorce. And I was very embarrassed. And what came out of it is I started teaching at Ryerson University, and I was getting paid to learn. And it was like, I really got to take stock of what I'd been doing for 12 years. And I was able, at that crisis point in my life, being able to really change. And, I met my beautiful wife, and she was in San Diego. And look where I am. I couldn't imagine my life there. So during COVID, we all have our COVID stories. I had to go back to Canada, and I got stuck there for 5.5 months. I was away from my family. And during that, I had rented my home out, and I moved back into my home. And I had a friend who invited me every night to join him and his friends in his friend's garage. And we're talking, it was a garage, and they were smoking cigars and they were talking. That was one of the most authentic experiences I had, was the garage. And these guys were so authentic, and they were successful people. Like, externally, you would say that they were successful, but they were full of themselves. And there was one guy who is almost like a curmudgeon, but like the kindest heart. His name was, well, it doesn't matter what his name was, but he said something which actually, he liked helping people. If you were down and out, his wife had guys getting divorced whenever, living on the couch, whatever. He was mentoring all these younger guys. And he said his greatest joy in life was just being there when someone's going through a tough time, and then later on their life was good. And even if he wasn't even really help them, they would turn to him and say, you helped me. And he said, he just gets smile knowing he was there. He was present. And I'm thinking, this is what I want. I want genuine people. And getting back to business success, life success, you find those people. They want to help you. You want to help them. You're going to have a full life, and you're going to have things happening. Because think of it this way. If I'm in a restaurant and I'm with someone, I'm really bored, and I hear people who are animated at the next table, we're going to end up listening to those people at the next table, and we might even want to join in to their conversation. So if you find something that, like the conversation we're having right now, and if it resonates and it's true to us, other people are going to want to join us. And really, what is success? It's like being able to find people to work with that you're building and you're just enjoying it. And they say, well, they bring something to the table, say, look at this, and you go and you search, and because you just want to go and show something else and bring it to the table. And in business, people think it's like there's like my hobby and then there's business. No, if you can actually find something that's authentic, people are going to want to join in, and you're going to be successful that way. I truly believe that.
All about playing the long game. I had this conversation with real estate brokers, mortgage brokers, whatever they are. And I'm like, I can't understand your profession. You call yourself a broker, by implication is you move one thing from here to there and that's it. But your life could be so much more meaningful. Let's say you're a real estate broker and you sell a house to Rabbi Rupp. And you really were great in that transaction. Imagine if you popped into that house 3 months later to say hi and to watch all these little kids running around the house full of joy and full of ownership in this beautiful home. You wouldn't call yourself a broker. What you do is you'd call yourself a deliverer of people's dreams. And if you thought like that and you actually did that, when someone's interviewing 6 different people to buy or sell a house for them, you know who's going to win every time? You. But if you don't do that, only your smooth talking will differentiate you. So start living. Look, when you wake up in the morning, be what Peter's talking about over here, a giver and a giver. Someone who gives and then receives from other givers. And transform your thinking. And by the way, it just goes over the head of most of these guys.
Well, no, I think that goes back. That's exactly the point that you've been making about authenticity to oneself, which is that it's so hard, especially. I'm just guessing, but I'm assuming that these people that you're speaking to are financially successful. They've had successful careers. They're doing great. Very often, people in that headspace are so focused on how do I consistently produce these results, or how do I stick with what actually worked, that it's almost prohibitive, self-prohibitive. They won't let them go and slow down and reassess and figure it out and to see these kinds of things. And I get so beyond emotional, and I've been doing this again. I'm in like the coaching, like rabbi business, where literally that's what I do. And when I take 2 seconds for to slow down, I'll get emotional right now if I think about it. If I take 2 seconds to think about the opportunities that I've had to be impactful in people's lives, it's overwhelming. It's overwhelming because again, we so pack our experiences in the box of like, what do I have to do today? You know, the fireman that goes and just like saves someone, he doesn't think 4 years down the road that you know, now this woman maybe has kids or she got married, or you know, because we can't think about that, because almost in a certain way we don't let ourselves see our own goodness. We don't let ourselves see, because it almost like it's overwhelming, because people have such a hard time accepting their own goodness, accepting their own unique gift, that it's intense, and it almost like makes us also feel like we have to rise up and consistently do that. And it's like, no, just appreciate the grace of, I got to be this person for that person, and just to feel that pride. And also it's like, if I did that, I don't really need that much after that. I already got everything I wanted. And then you're again moving into that place of abundance, that I've got all the stuff that I need, and then I'm just only operating out of what I want to do.
100%.
Can I add something to what Michael just said about the real estate agent? There's certain things, and let me step back. I feel I'm an entrepreneur, and what I mean by that is I believe in our society, entrepreneurship gives us the greatest ability given to humans, and that's the ability to self-actuate, because we're rubbing against the universe and we're finding out what works for us and what doesn't work for us. And one of the things which I think I feel sorry for many people is they're like bumblebees. They see people doing certain things. So real estate agents, they see this guy who they don't think is the smartest person in the world, and they're making money. So they say, I'm going to do this because I can make money. Not that I'm going to help build homes and I get enjoyment and I like this and I like that. Because again, it goes back to when I used the metaphor of the restaurant. You know, like if I'm excited about something, Mike and Jacob will be excited. But if I'm not, there's so much communication that we give, which people don't, you know, that being communicated, that it's not beyond our words. It's our tonality. It's the way that we move, how animated we are. Because I know when I talk about my writing, I get animated, and people say that to me. Like and that's what you have to find. What do you naturally get animated about? What are you passionate about? And then figure out, how do I get paid doing it? And I've been very fortunate. I found out a way that I get to go and explore, like Mike shared. Like I can write a book on some of the most, like I've met some most fascinating people walking this planet. And I figured out a way that I can make a really good living and deal with that need to explore my environment. And one of the things that Mike mentioned, I met someone who, in all intents purposes, he had a massive impact on the world, and he's still searching, and then, God bless him, searching to find some magic pill that's going to cure everybody else. And
he's in his 80s already.
And I'm content that my truth, I don't have my truth. And this is where the calmness had come over me. My truth, I don't fully know my truth. And I don't need my truth, whatever it might be, to be your truth, Jacob, or Mike's truth. And that is where the calming aspect of me has arisen, because I don't need that anymore. Now, if someone goes and likes the way that I live my life and they want to ask me about what my opinion is, that's great. I don't need to go and have you accept what I have. And one of the beautiful things about getting older is that I won't have anybody enforce that upon me. And I'm at the age right now, because I had that health scare, I will tell that person to back off with their viewpoints. And in the past, I would try to squirm out of it and be polite, or maybe even like pretend that I was accepting what they were doing. No, you don't have to accept my way. And please, to people enforcing their way on me, back off, because I'm not going to put up. And that, to me, if a person comes to that understanding about themselves, it is attractive, and you'll be successful, because the right people, you don't need that many people to be successful in your life. You just need the right people. And it could be Margaret Mead.
Let me ask you a question, Peter.
Yeah.
Sitting in front of a group of 10 guys and girls who are 16 years old, 17 years old. And they say, Mr. Merrick, you're an author, you have people's attention. We are getting so many mixed messages. We're not even in schools. Our teachers can't guide us. Give us some sage life advice. What would you say to that group?
Go out and fail and show you got characters getting up. There was a book I read years ago. It's about Phil Fisher. Warren Buffett had two people he said it was Phil Fisher, 10%, and it was Benjamin Graham, 90%. Phil Fisher was looking at the quality of a business and the people running the business, while Benjamin Graham was looking at the numbers. And I always was attracted to Phil Fisher because he said one thing. He said, never invest in someone who hasn't fallen really miserably and punched out, teeth knocked out, everything. But they had the audacity to say to life, I'm here. They got up and they moved forward, because that person there will make it look easy to the rest of us, because one failure, they will not, as long as they're getting up, they have a ticket. Remember I said to the amusement park, they have a ticket to the game, and they're going to move forward. And those are the people, that's where the stamina is. And I was a professor or an instructor at a university for a number of years, and I had a student come to me and he said, am I going to be successful? And I said, you're a really smart guy, Daniel, you're going to be successful. But what I wish upon you, and this is looking at my greatest growth, is you fall down and you get beaten by life, but you get up. Because that's where you're going to define yourself, the ability to get up. It's easy for a young kid to go out, especially with this technology. I come up with an app, and now I'm a zillionaire, and I think like I'm so great to be successful. It's very easy. However, it's not easy to be able to get up. And I would actually share with you that I'm so glad that I had those failures in my life, because I'm able to have this conversation. I unfortunately have met certain people who, they've hit it out of the park, and people start treating them a certain way, which isn't authentic. My favorite, the quote that I like is Oscar Wilde, like, what's the difference between a cynic? A cynic knows the price of everything. And the price, and what a cynic is, they know the price of everything but the value of nothing. And people who are entrepreneurs who've like fallen down, they're able to look at someone, they're able to see quality. But someone who's just been born to affluence and success, and it's been easy for them, they can't tell someone who's authentic from someone who has a good golf swing.
Yeah, 100%.
Mike, you got to jump off this call. So just very quickly, Peter, how do people find out about you? And we will loop all this in so that we can move on here.
Well, my last book is on Amazon, and it is The King of Main Street by Peter Merrick, which would be me. And I love connecting to people on LinkedIn. I know, Jacob, that's how we connected, because I find that I love that forum because it's active and it's not political.
Outstanding. Gentlemen, thank you so
Rabbi,
much.
what about your closing question for Peter?
Oh, well, okay. If you have the bandwidth. So, Peter, what does it mean to be a Jewish executive? What's unique about being a Jewish executive?
To realize, when my father passed away, I read Psalm 49, which is read like after you say the Kaddish. And it basically says that don't get attached to really anything, like this cup, my wallet, my glasses, my car, because the wealthy and the beggar, they're the same. It all goes. And that is something that's reminded to me. And I believe that we have such a richness because we can go and look at our history. And I know in my own family, I have a very small family on my grandmother's side. And it's because her father had a really successful business in Galicia, and he would have worked in a factory if he came to Canada. So he stayed. And because he was attached to things, he ended up losing everything. So that's what I learned from being a Jewish, looking at history and saying that if you get attached to things, the golden calf, you will be consumed and destroyed by it. And that's the beautiful thing about our religion. And unfortunately, too many people have become, in our community, attached to the calf, not to the teachings.
Beautiful.
The learning.
Thank you so much. Outstanding.
Thank you, Peter. That's what you're going to tell the 17-year-olds as well.
Michael, coach you on that. Thank you so much. Take care, guys. This was a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you.
What fun. Good Shabbos, everybody. Good Shabbos, everybody. That was.
Thank you for listening. We appreciate your support. For more information or how to reach us, please follow us on social and reach out to jrupp@aish.edu.